Now look, unfortunately, I am no stranger to challenges in life. I know that sometimes life can feel like it's just not giving what it's supposed to give. I know, especially in this day and age, it can feel like you're never where you're supposed to be at in life, and that level that you're supposed to be at is constantly changing. If that's you currently or anyone that you know about or care about, my hope with this video is that I help you get out of that rut permanently and start leveling up. For those that are unfamiliar with the channel, I go by Corporate Will, and my chief aim in life is to achieve self-actualization, and in doing so, help others to do the exact same thing. What I've found in that pursuit of achieving and trying to just level up consistently are three things that have been super successful for me, and I would love to share them with you today. One, knowing your best self. And we'll talk about all of these. Two, getting exposure. And then three, and equally as important, probably more important, both combined, is staying committed to one and two. Now, if you're unfamiliar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, or you're unfamiliar with the concept of self-actualization, shameless plug, I do have a couple of videos on the topics that you can feel free to educate yourself on. But when I speak about self-actualization in layman terms, all I'm speaking about is being at a place where I'm constantly achieving success and continuously growing, or as we see in corporate America, in a state of continuous improvement. In fact, I would bargain that when most people say that I just want to be successful or I want to level up, what they really mean is that they want to achieve self-actualization. Case in point, if you ask any successful person, right, about their successes, I'm pretty sure they'll tell you that being successful is a product of not just having success, but sustaining success. And in order to sustain success, that requires you to continuously grow, to continuously evolve, and to continuously get better. And so what I want to talk about today is what it takes to not just become successful, but to continuously grow and evolve in an overall layman terms, level up in life. Now, for those unfamiliar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, it is important for context in completing this first step, because without knowing your own hierarchy of needs, it is impossible to know your best self. For those familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and you know those hierarchy of needs to be your physiological needs, followed by your security needs, your loving belonging needs, and then lastly, those esteem needs before you reach self-actualization. Now, I'm a visual person and I tend to talk in analogies. So what I want to do is break this down in layman terms by providing an example using a fictitious person named Chris. Chris is a recent graduate who currently lives in Dallas, Texas, making about, call it $70,000 a year before taxes as a recruiter at Amazon. Chris decides one day that their physiological needs are going to be having good nutrition, a stable and clean home, and a healthy mind, body, and spirit. From a security perspective, they know that this doesn't just mean they have to be safe, but they have to have the means to otherwise secure those physiological needs. So they define their security needs as being able to live in a safe area and to have the means to sustain their physiological needs, or i.e., pay their rent or their mortgage, afford groceries, and do some leisurely activities here and there. From a loving belonging perspective, they know that their needs are to have a loving partner and to have a good core family and friends that they can lean on and that can lean on them. And then lastly, from an esteem perspective, their needs are to simply feel a sense of satisfaction with life. Now that Chris has clearly defined their needs, the next step for them to take on this pursuit of knowing their best self is to do what I call define a SMART goal statement for those needs. Now, SMART is just an analogy. It stands for specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. I also have a whole video that talks about this concept in the context of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. But for the purposes of this example, just know that these SMART goals, right, they have to be specific enough to plan for it. They have to be measurable enough to monitor the progress or the failure of. They have to be achievable based on where they are today. And they also have to be relevant and time-bound enough to continue to be a priority. So continuing with Chris as the example, let's go over what their SMART goal statement looks like. After some careful thought and consideration about what Chris's needs are, Chris decides, using a 1-year time frame, that they're going to define their SMART goal statements for the year. In order to fulfill their hierarchy of needs, this SMART goal statement consists of them wanting to be able to live in a safe apartment not too far from an airport and afford their monthly living expenses while saving 1 year worth of living expenses as an emergency fund. In addition to saving the 1 year of emergency funds, Chris wants to invest $10,000 while leaving a cushion of money to spend on leisurely activities and gifts with friends and family throughout the year. Lastly, Chris desires to be in a relationship and see friends and family at least once a week or every other week for that matter. And they want to get promoted at work and begin saving for a house. Now, just like that, Chris has defined their needs and they've defined SMART goals in order to fulfill those needs. Now, of course, I'm not saying that you have to have the same SMART goals. And of course, I'm not saying that you have to have the same hierarchy of needs even. But what I am emphasizing is that you should spend a lot of time pondering what your needs are, and you should ponder how to actually build goals to obtain and fulfill those needs. Now, I know that 1 year can seem like a very long time in this day and age, but in the grand scheme of your life, this is a relatively short amount of time. Remember that the goal with self-actualization is to not just achieve success, but to continuously grow. And when you put a 1 year time frame around your goals, I found, at least in my personal experience, that it makes achieving and just identifying what's specific, measurable, and achievable just that more relevant and feasible given where you are today. It is one thing to talk about and have very big and audacious and ambitious goals. I think that's great, and I think that's what everyone should do. But it is almost a skill, right, to actually be able to dream big, but also be pragmatic, understanding that, again, the goal with self-actualization is to not just achieve success, but to continuously grow, which means that that leaves you, right, within that 1 year time frame. It gives you this room to actually achieve success, and it leaves you room to continuously grow beyond just 1 year. So I would challenge you to think about, when you're making your SMART goals, sticking to a 1 year, maybe 1.5 years max goal from a time bound perspective. Now, what Chris just did in identifying their needs and aligning SMART goals to fulfill them is what we actually set out to do in the first place. And that is identify the best version of ourselves. The best version of Chris is the individual that not only achieves each of those SMART goals in their SMART goal statement, but also leaves room to get better the next year. And how do they know they're getting better, or leaving room rather, to get better that next year? Well, I'll tell you, they already have a blueprint. Upon achieving success with those goals that they've already laid out for year one, they already have a blueprint, if not the full scale plan, of how to build on those goals or create new goals altogether for the following year. And that leads us to step two. I was at this career event just recently, and I heard this concept that's been sticking to my mind ever since. And it is this concept of living a life of design and not by default. And what I found so beautiful about this and about that statement is really what this whole process of leveling up is all about. And that is really designing your future, designing the life that you want to live. As we saw with this example of Chris, right, where they decided to think about and jot down and really make real their needs, the next step that they did was really just that, designing their self, right, designing their life. They then created, this fictitious Chris created who they wanted to be by setting goals to make sure that person exists, right? And this is no different for you and I, right? It is that simple. We make it so sophisticated. We sometimes make it so hard. We cloud our judgment with so many other outside forces, when it's really as simple as digging deep to understand who we are, what we need, and then making realistic, specific, measurable, achievable, and relevant time-bound goals around that. I think if you can do that, the only thing left for you to do in order to unlock that next level is to get exposure. In order to get exposure, I want to share with you 5 tips that I call the 5 wells that will undoubtedly help you not just reach success, but get the exposure to get to the next level after that. As you can see by the shirt, I am a proud alumni of Morehouse College. I was actually at a career event earlier, which is why I still have this on, but it's very timely because I was talking to kids about this very same concept, right, of leveling up. We're talking about just what they wanted to be in life, and that's really what inspired this particular video. Now, the reason why I'm so proud of Morehouse in particular as it pertains to this video is because for me, getting exposure really started by me going to that college, because when I came in, one of the mantras, or the mantra for my class that our president at the time charged us with, was to become Renaissance men. Dr. Robert Franklin, he was our president at the time. He was this really cool, laid back guy, but he really challenged us that in order for us to become Renaissance men, that we would have to do something called incorporate and build on the 5 wells. Those 5 wells were, in no particular order, being well read, well spoken, well dressed, well traveled, and well balanced ultimately. Now, for me, along with learning about Maslow's hierarchy of needs and self-actualization, this was such a game changer for me. And it's something that I've since applied in my life ever since then because it has been that pivotal for me. I didn't always know the best thing to do or what I should major in or what I wanted to be when I grew up. But by following those tenets, right, of becoming these five wells, right, in order to become a Renaissance man, inevitably and almost an accident, I got so much exposure that I know and believe you can get the exact same way. Making sure that you're well dressed to start off with, right? I know growing up playing sports, we always had this saying where if you looked good, you felt good, and if you felt good, you performed great. And that was so true, right? Anytime I got to get on the field or get on the court of play and I got to wear my wristbands or just put on a little bit more swagger than the regular jerseys we were given, I played bigger and better than I probably was, right? It just boosted my confidence. Fast forward when I got into my corporate career and I started doing things that I never thought I'd be doing, part of me getting into rooms that I never thought I'd be in, part of me speaking with people that had influence and power over my career at the time really came from the fact that I was always well dressed. We learned in college that you should always wear a suit to work. So I would always come to work with a suit and tie and just look as sharp as I could, right? And believe it or not, these things, right, just these micro habits of just wanting to show up well dressed afforded me these opportunities where people knew me as this well-dressed kid and they would open up doors for me to talk to people that I otherwise wouldn't have talked to, get into rooms that I otherwise wouldn't have got into. And at that point, I was able to leverage everything else I had in my arsenal to take advantage of each of those opportunities and also help others along the way. When it came to being well spoken, this almost went hand in hand, right? I was actually a mute growing up. And one of the reasons why I probably didn't have a lot of friends is because when I started speaking, I had this very bad speech impediment. Now, I did get the privilege of joining something called Toastmasters very early on in life as a high school student, where I got to practice public speaking. And it gave me this opportunity to get more and more confident with just articulating my words and sending out a message. It wasn't always about, having the biggest lexicon, right, or having these fancy words in my arsenal. It was really just about how effective was I at delivering a message that got through to people. And in doing Toastmasters and getting myself out there to practice public speaking, I honed that skill. I'd never say I'm the best, but if you knew who eighth grade Will Everett was and you know who he is now, you'd see huge, huge strides in where I was versus where I am today. And just like being well dressed, being well spoken and just being able to articulate a statement and to get through to people has worked wonders in my professional career because, again, it allowed me to meet people and not just meet people, but have conversations with them that change the trajectory of not just my life, but others as well. And then the third thing of being well read, again, in no particular order, but for me, being well read was truly the cheat code in life. Now, I did have the added benefit that I didn't grow up with a lot of friends. I moved around a lot as an army brat. So I very much so gained this sense of passion around reading, right? It's something that I always fell back to. When I was in a phase where I got bullied, I would hide and go read. Where I was in my phase where I didn't have a lot of friends, I would hide and go read. And even to this day, it is still very much so an ingrained habit that I always, always, always do. And for that reason, I believe that being well read is truly the cheat code in life because I was never the smartest kid. I just found everything to be in a book. From my earliest days in, call it middle school, if I can recall, it's all the way up into college and post grad. Everything that I learned out of a book or sometimes a YouTube video. Just being well read gave me the cheat code to become smart. Every quiz, every test answer, I likely found in a book. If my teacher told us that we were only supposed to read these 12 to 15 pages, I still read the entire book because I forgot what more than most people knew. And by the time I got around to actually learning my lessons in the curriculum that we were given, I'd already had a leg up on understanding the ambiguous topics. So I already knew some questions to ask that may have come up later on in sessions. So again, being well read worked wonders because that is what really afforded me this opportunity to get smart. And it is honestly a cheat code that breaks barriers. Before I could ever travel, getting to the world travel piece, I knew where I wanted to go because I found them in books. Before I ever met an idol, I knew who these people were because I read so much about them, right? Reading really changed my life. And I know for a fact that it can change yours and give you all the exposure that you can ever ask for. Now, from a well-traveled perspective, again, this was another cheat code, but whether it was moving from city to city, state to state, town to town, country to country, continent to continent, every level of moving I counted as being well-traveled. Every time I got to go somewhere new, this was an opportunity not for just me to get exposure to others, but for others to get exposure to me. By the time I got to call it my first job upon graduation, I had been so well traveled and so well read and so well spoken and so well dressed that I was almost relatable to anybody, right? I'd seen so much in life that I was able to talk about a little bit about just about anything. And while I know that there is certainly a win in being a master of something, I personally have benefited from being a guy that really knows a little bit about a whole lot. And that all came from me being well traveled, well read, well balanced overall. Without exposure, it is a very large challenge to grow and to get better. And as a minority, I personally believe it is what keeps so many minorities marginalized. I believe exposure is the difference between being impoverished and being a society contributing citizen. I believe it's the difference between ignorance and intelligence. I believe that exposure is the difference between where you are today and where you want to be in the future. It is hard to become a doctor if you've never met one. It's hard to become an actuary if you've never even heard the word. And it's hard to be a consultant, for example, if you don't even know what consultants do. All of these things, though, can be found through exposure, asking questions, showing up well dressed, reading as much as you can, practicing being well spoken, just getting your words out, being well traveled, going to different places to see different perspectives, to see all that the world has offered will inevitably get you to a place where you're not just well balanced and you're not just reaching success, but you're also continuously growing in life. And again, that is what I believe is the key to self-actualization. Now, last and certainly not least, I know you probably heard this a billion times in life, and I'm going to be the person to re-emphasize it for you. I love this saying of commitment, and it goes something like, commitment is doing what you said you're going to do long after the feeling in which you set it in has left you. And I think that's so beautiful because that's really what commitment comes down to. After you get done watching this video, after you get done listening to your hype music, after you get done with that little inkling of inspiration that you'll have for a few moments, you have to find it somewhere within you, whether it be mentally, whether it be in your heart, whether it be in your physical bones. You have to find something in you that keeps you committed to who that best self is that you just created and what it takes for that best self to get all the exposure that they need in order for you to achieve success and ultimately grow in life. I think without commitment, right, you never get just about anything done. There's nothing that we have in this life that is worth having that did not take commitment. So you and I are no different, right? In order to reach the state of self-actualization, which I know for a fact that we are all capable of achieving, we have to have a level of commitment. Knowing yourself, that's easy. It takes some separation. It takes some introspection, right? Thinking for yourself. It takes some pondering, but knowing your needs is an easy concept. Creating this list, this goal set of who you want to be, of what you aspire to, all of that easy. These are things you can see around you. If you don't know for yourself, you can get exposure, right, through those 5 wills to figure out what it is you want to be, who it is you want to be, but without having commitment to sticking to that person, believing in that person, knowing that each step that you're taking year in, year out, day in, day out is leading you to achieving those goals and getting better. Without that commitment, right, all of this is just null and void. So I challenge you, I challenge all people, including myself, don't just practice these things. Don't just listen to a YouTube video or read a book or even travel somewhere and not focus on the commitment that it takes to continuously do these things, to continuously practice and expose yourself and get better day by day. Without that commitment, again, I think it is just null and void to do anything in life. So I will leave you all with that last step. After knowing your best self, after getting all the exposure that you can, you must stay committed in order for you to realize your greatest potential and to reach that level of self-actualization that I know you can reach. Now, with that being said, I'll hush now. I'm looking forward to engaging with you all. I did something big in creating a new IG, so you can also reach me at the Corporate Will on IG. I'm always looking to engage with you. I'm always looking for feedback. I'm always looking for ways that I can help others reach and sustain self-actualization. So without further ado, thank you so much for your time and energy today. I'm wishing you all the best in leveling up this year. Let's go kick ass.